Hey everyone, my name is Julia, and this is Conversations on Race. Our series right now is on being biracial or multiracial, and joining me today is a very special guest from the Indiana House of Representatives, Representative Earl Harris. Hi Earl, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining our conversation today.
No, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for asking me to be a part of this.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to start off our talk with kind of just asking you what your occupation is.
Yep. So I'm a state representative, House District 2, which is in Northwest Indiana. So my district is all of East Chicago, part of Gary, part of Hammond, and a couple of precincts in Griffith. And then I also do television and video production. So I have a company called Motivation Media, and my company produces anything from things on television, so broadcast, TV, as well as marketing pieces. In fact, I actually produced a documentary years ago called In My Skin on multiracial people in the state of Indiana. So I have some background in this on the media side.
Yeah, I was super excited when I saw that link that you sent me because that video sounds really familiar. I think maybe my dad had told me about it, the In My Skin video that you did. So my next question kind of just has to do more with your background. So what is your ethnicity?
So my mother is Mexican. She's firstborn generation here in the States. My grandmother, born and raised in Mexico before she and her family came over. I believe my grandmother was 3, if I'm not mistaken. So it was her parents, and her brother. Sorry, I forgot. In fact, I think I have digital copies of some of their official paperwork.
Oh,
If I'm not mistaken, from when they came over. And then my father is Black. He's from Tennessee, just to give some specifics of where he's from. But my father was Black, so Mexican and Black.
okay. Which side of your race do you identify with more?
I wouldn't say that I have one that I identify with more. I do both. I think if I can kind of flip that around, the fact that my last name is Harris, I think more people think of me as Black first. I know actually that. As long as, my father was a state rep for 33 years. My mother served for a year after my father passed away. And even though my mother was there at the State House for 30 plus years, I've actually found out that there are reps that didn't know that she's Mexican. And so as I've been there and working on things and talking about being half Mexican and working on some of my initiatives to help the Latino population in the state, there's reps who looked at me and gone, "You're half Mexican?" I'm like, "Yeah, you've seen my mom for years," but they didn't know.
Okay.
And I understand the Harris, it would be different if it was flipped and my father was Latino and my mother was Mexican. I have a more Latino name, but I'm very proud to be both of them. And I think it's a great thing.
Do you feel like you get asked what your ethnicity is a lot by people?
It has happened. I'll tell you, I have literally been asked before, "What are you?" Because, someone had looked at me, and I try not to get offended by that. I actually once was, and not that I'm 7 feet tall, but walking into a Mexican restaurant once, and the hostess looked at me and she goes, "You look Mexican, but you're too tall." And so and then she said, all the guys that are here are all short Mexicans. And so I explained to her I was half Black, half Mexican. So I was vacationed in the Dominican years ago. There's people that asked me there if I was Dominican. I was even asked once. I stopped to get gas when I was working on my master's at Ball State, as I mentioned, and I stopped to get gas on my way out of campus, and it was a Indian gentleman who worked there, and he asked me, he goes, "Are you Indian?" So I don't know if I just have one of those looks where I kind of pass over multiple different ethnicities. The "what are you?" it makes me laugh. I don't get offended by it, but it is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because it's, you can, sometimes you look at people and you can tell they're looking at you trying to figure out something.
So can you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up multiracial?
I grew up in a diverse family. I have relatives that are half white, they're half Mexican, half white or whatever. And I have cousins I have a cousin that, well, he's bald now, but he had red hair and blue eyes. So I've had, blonde haired cousins. I'll tell you a story from when I think we were in high school or college, I forget, and played on a church basketball team. And so it was myself and then 3 of my cousins. The other 3 cousins, 2 of them are brothers and then another cousin, they're half Mexican and half white. 2 of the cousins really look Mexican, and then the one cousin really looks white. And so we were at a tournament, the basketball tournament, and we were talking to some guys from another team, another church team, and they were all Black. And we just happened to make a comment about us being cousins. And the guy looked at me and he looked at them and he looked at me and goes, "How are you related to them? How are you cousins with them?" Because he just couldn't make the connection. So, but my family I've always grown up in terms of family and friends with every ethnicity. And actually, I always thought it was a cool thing that I was multiracial, that I was half Black and half Mexican. It wasn't something that, I saw as a negative. It was something that I saw as a complete positive. And it's something even now as an adult and even as a child, I openly shared that knowledge with people and explained to them, because I think it's important to let people know that multiracial people exist. We're not new. That's one of the things I put in the documentary. It's not as if multiracial people just showed up in the last 30 years. I mean, there's a history of it. I'll actually tell you something I learned from one of my uncles on my mom's side last year, which I didn't know this, but the second president of Mexico, his name is Vicente Guerrero. He's actually half Black and half Mexican.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. I mean, I did not know that. I've seen it pop up actually recently. Some people have posted on it and put stuff. So to me, it was a cool thing being multiracial. I always took pride in it and enjoyed it, and I always shared it to let people know what my background is.
You feel like Blacks and Mexicans get along for the most part?
It's interesting there. Yes and no. There are some good sides and there are some bad sides. So, I think the best thing would be if there was a cohesive get along. I mean, I think that in general in life, no matter what your background is. But when you talk about Black and Mexicans, there's some that is yes and there's some that's no. We've seen some tensions. I've seen tensions as well as I've seen the getting along and working well together.
So what was it like having a parent in the legislature? Do you feel like that shaped your perspective on race at all?
I don't know if it really affected that. I mean, you kind of see for lack of a better term, the numbers game. I think there are more minorities in the legislature now. Than there probably were back when my father started. I don't know the exact number, but I'm sure there are. And and one of the things that I like to do is encourage people to get involved. You can be part of the process. You don't necessarily have to be an elected. There's other positions. And so, here in Northwest Indiana, one of the things I do is like to encourage people to get involved that maybe don't think about that and that are, Black or Hispanic, because I think it's a good thing to bring in more diverse voices, more diverse viewpoints to what's going on at the State House. Because the reality is, when you look at Indiana, it's not as a whole the most diverse state in the country. One of the things, when you look at last year in the bias crime, hate crime, whatever you want to call it, bill, that was one of the problems with it, is there's parts of the state of Indiana that don't have any diversity, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's sexual preference, they just don't, I was having a conversation I remember with one of the Republican representatives who was kind of leading that process of getting the law passed. And we were talking and he told me, he goes, "Honestly, Earl," he goes, "I have a bunch of people over there that have no concept of anybody that doesn't look like them." So, I think anything we can do to bring more diversity to the State House, the better, and I obviously, you talk about being Black and honestly multiracial as well, because I look at myself as someone that in the position I am should let people know that that's my background, that's what I am, and that, multiracial people need to be part of the process as well and voice their thoughts and opinions on things.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm hearing is that there's certain areas, probably in every state, maybe more so in the Midwest, where it's a little more conservative, where people just aren't aware of the issues that come with being a minority. And so they don't see a need for something like a hate crimes bill or legislation to shape the mindset of a society.
That you are 100% correct. I've had, with what's going on and legislation we're working on for this coming session, I've had some conversations, and there's people that have said, that are white, that have commented and said, "I had no idea what life can be like for someone that's not white." They don't have any concept of it because they just have never had to deal with things that people that have our skin color have to deal with sometimes.
Kind of going back to growing up as a person of color, I've been asking people this question because I think the idea of race, I feel like a lot of people will say they don't see race and they don't see color, but because racism exists, I try to explain to people that even though race is a social construct, you can't ignore it when something like things like racism are a part of everyday life. And so I'm curious, what would you say is your earliest race-related memory? Well, I'll give you an example. So for me, I remember the first time I realized race was, I guess you're right. There's two answers to this question. The first time I realized race was when my parents distinguished them. My dad is black, my mom is white, and us as brown. But another time was when I experienced racism as a person of color, and that's when I realized there's something that comes with being a certain color in the society that we live in.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So in terms of when I realized that people are of different races, I was young. I can't tell you what age I was. I don't remember that. As I said, I grew up in a diverse family. So to me, it was always, here's people and everyone has different skin color and who cares? But at some point you realize, okay, people are looking at people and categorizing them based on how they look, and that, I have relatives that are half Mexican and half white that really look white, and their experience is going to be different than mine. So yeah, you realize that at a young age. And you start hearing of Mexican and black and white and Native American and whatever the different, Indian, Middle Eastern, whatever. You start hearing about them and you start noticing and thinking and looking into. And then, sometimes it's also, I think, your parents start teaching you about this because you really need to know how the world is and where I hate to phrase it this way, but for lack of a better way of phrasing it, where you fit in or may fit in, or at least where people may try to fit you in. I can tell you, because I've actually talked about this in some of these conversations recently, the earliest memory I have, most Black people can tell you the first time they were called the N-word. So you talk about the negative side, like you said, when you experience racism. And I was about 7 or 8 years old, give or take. And my mother and I were in Texas. My grandmother, we were visiting family. And so we went to church. I'm Mormon, which is a predominantly white religion. And, going into Sunday school, there was this kid who called me an N-word from Africa. And he said it multiple times in the Sunday school. Now, this is in church in Sunday school in Laredo, Texas. And the two things that stick out are, number one, he said it out loud multiple times. Number two, the Sunday school teacher never flinched, never told him to stop, didn't do anything. And so as I look back on that memory, it's, this was a young kid like I was, so he was taught that at home. Otherwise, why would he say that? So his parents or whomever taught that. But number two, why didn't it almost means I would presume the Sunday school teacher probably felt the same way because she didn't at any point correct him or stop him. Wow. So that's the earliest in terms of negative memory that I have.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question is because, like I said, I feel like there's people who choose not to see race, or they choose not to see race,
Yeah.
and they don't understand the ramifications for that, to not recognize that our society is built a certain way so that one majority group can be at an advantage to another majority, or to the minority group, basically. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. I'm always curious to hear how people first realized race was a thing and whether that was like a negative or a positive experience. But it sounds like you kind of had both, growing up in a very diverse community, but then experiencing something for the first time that made you realize that it could actually be a negative thing in the eyes of other people.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you something, when people say, well, I don't see skin color. Yeah, you do. You're not, unless you're blind, you see it. You see someone's skin color, you see what gender they are. I mean, there's a list of things you see. Do they have long hair? Do they have short hair? You get it. And, that's how a person looks is part of their story and part of their background and how they relate to things. I mean, if you are at State House, we have the Black Caucus, and so I'm actually the vice chair of that. And Robin Shackelford, who's a rep in Indianapolis, is the chair. And we had a meeting with a representative who got in trouble. He's done this multiple times. In fact, I think he just did it again since this meeting, who posted something that is seen as racist. He wanted to meet with us, and he made that comment. He said, well, I don't see skin color. And my response was, no, you have to see skin color because it's there. But you need to understand that doesn't make someone better or above another person, but it influences their experience in life, how they've been treated, what has happened to them, etc. And that's part of what makes a person a person. And I won't get into it, there's other things I said. So I really disagree with people or comment when people say, well, I don't see skin color. Yes, you do, you have to. But what you need to also do is understand that that means differences. And it could mean things where, we know, as we talked about earlier, there are parts of the state that don't have any diversity. When people that grow up like that get into other parts of the state where there is, how do they react to people that don't look like them? How do they treat them? How do they, what do they think of them? Do they think they're better than them? How to treat them? I mean, that's part of this whole problem that we're having now, is the way people are treated based on how they look, and different experiences people are having. And it affects you as someone that has our skin color. Even in my position, it has an effect on how you act in different situations. I'm the son of a Black man. And again, like I said, most Black people can tell you when they were called the N-word the first time. Most sons of Black fathers, their father has had that talk with them about what it means to be they are, whether it's, this is how you react when you're pulled over the police, or, I talked about having diverse friends. And I remember my father having a conversation with me about, there's places your friends can go that you are not going to be welcome, meaning white friends. Whom we are and our ethnicity and skin color shapes the person we are and our experiences in life.
How do you feel like race influences your work as a state representative?
So I'll give you a little bit of a background story on something. I took, both my degrees are in communications and media. And I took a class that was something like media or gender and race in the media. And it really broke down anything from commercials to print ads to all these things, and just images of people and how they're placed and how they are put in to different situations and shown in terms of what the manager looks like, what the worker looks like, et cetera, all these things. So that's one of those classes where it really caused me to think a little bit more about this. And then as, looking at my area, which is a predominantly minority area, looking at my being a state representative, there's, again, minority in terms of the people that are elected as well as staff, making sure that Blacks and Mexicans, or Blacks and Latinos, know that there's opportunity at the State House. One of the things I've had conversations about is when you look at the lobbyists, there's not a lot of diversity in the lobbyists. There are some Blacks that are in the lobbyists. There really aren't any Latinos. So that's also, when you talk about creating policy, it's not just those of us that are elected, but it's those that are also lobbying. It's those that are work at agencies. So it's a big thing for me to get people involved that look like me, that have, so there's diversity in terms of Blacks and Latinos. Again, as I said, and I'm repeating myself, I think it's better off for us as a state and a country to have that diversity. And then also, my area is a minority majority area, and I want people from my area to be part of the process.
So I feel like you talked about the difficulties / benefits of being mixed race. Is there anything else you want to touch on in that regard?
But I understand the reality of what my skin color means and how, depending on where I am, I'll be treated, whether it's being in a jewelry store and literally having a salesperson, no one spoke to me, literally having her walk past me, walk to the white guy next to me, ask him if he needs help. He says, no, I'm still looking. And then she just keeps going. So I don't know if I turned invisible for 30 seconds, but the entire time I was in the jewelry store, never got acknowledged. I mean, is that a life-threatening situation? No. But when people have to deal with situations like that on a regular basis, it has an effect. And the other thing I'll bring up, that is just kind of stupid. I mean, your job is to sell in that case, jewelry, a product. People don't just randomly walk into jewelry stores window shopping. They usually walk in because they're looking for something. I was actually looking for a Christmas gift when this happened. And so it doesn't make sense financially to do that. I mean, it's not as if Black people and brown people don't have money now. I mean, we have careers, successful, et cetera. So, there's a part of me that when I think about the way people are treated, you're really just hurting yourself in a lot of those financial, because that was the point where I left and never returned to jewelry store ever again. So, there's a part of me that looks at people and thinks you're really, yeah, you're causing people like me a problem because we know the situation and how we may be dealt, but you're also causing your own financial hurt by not helping people. I mean, I don't think, because I believe I know who the owner of that jewelry store was, I don't think she was an owner, but if I was an owner, I'd want to have a conversation of why would you walk past this gentleman who's in there?
Mm-hmm.
And if you walk past him because you looked at his skin color and thought he wasn't actually there to buy, you're sadly mistaken. And when that happened, I shared that with multiple people. And actually, I'll be honest with you, one person who was a white female, she said, honey, you were the wrong skin color to be in that store. So I didn't know it, but there might have been a reputation with the owner of that store that I was unaware of, or I would not have gone in there.
What would you tell your 8-year-old self about being a person of color, like words of wisdom? And the reason I ask this question is I know that there are young men and women who are biracial or mixed or multiracial, and it's kind of a confusing experience sometimes when you're not sure which culture or race to identify with, especially in times where racial injustice is rampant right now, and you are carrying two narratives in your life, trying to figure out where you really fit in that story. So yeah, what words of wisdom would you have?
Well, for an there's so many things I could tell an 8-year-old me, but
I'm not being a person of color,
there's a long list of things I'd go, don't do these things. No. When you talk about what I would tell an 8-year-old version of myself about race and identity, I would tell them, you're going to be fine. That what you're experiencing as an 8-year-old and starting to learn about race and ethnicity, yes, there's going to be some negative things. I mean, the story I told you about being called the N-word, I was at about that age, as I remember. But that you're going to be fine, and to, which I've done as an adult, stick to the fact that you are both and you are proud of both. And that, it really, to me, I mean, I know not every multiracial person has a completely positive experience. I mean, we all know of stories of people that it is, it's caused stress, but that it's going to be a good thing. And that, you really, to me, become even more, well, I'll use this in the political side. I think I have become even more beneficial to more people, because sometimes people put you in the box of, okay, you're only going to care about stuff that involves this, Black people or white people or Latinos or whatever. Where what I've experienced is I've had, both Blacks and Latinos see me as, okay, this is our person who's going to fight this is a person who's going to fight for our initiatives and things we want and we know we can count on. I'm involved with whether they're, Indiana or national legislative organizations that are both, there's a National Black Caucus of Legislators, there's a National Hispanic Caucus. I'm involved with both of them. To me, it's important to be a part of both, and I want people to look at me and see he's Black and Mexican. I mean, I don't shy away from that. People, even if I'm with one of the Latino organizations or the Black organizations, they know whom I am. And I think, it's even come up, I'll give you a story of, with the Black Caucus in meetings, there's times where, Robin or someone has pointed out, Earl is Latino, and talked about, we've talked about things that are quote unquote Black things, but also the group has brought up Latino initiatives as well, or things. So to me, going back to your question, I would tell my 8-year-old self, be who you are and don't deviate from it, and be proud of it. That it is, it's a benefit and it's something to be proud of.
So I'm reading a book right now called How to Be an Anti-Racist. He talks about how a racist society is crafted by the policies of that society. And so to create an anti-racist society, you also need to use policies. A lot of people right now are looking to the legislature, to Congress, and to policies to solve this issue of racism in our country. So my question for you is, can policy really create an anti-racist society?
So one of the things my father used to say goes something like, you cannot legislate morality. And you can't. I mean, you can put things in place, but you can't make a person not be racist. So I think the role of policy is to put things in place to help and prevent. So those racist things that people want to do to prevent those from happening, or because we, to some degree, have a punitive society, if you do them, you pay the price. Which, when you look at that, so maybe it doesn't change a person's heart, but maybe they think twice about some of the things that they may do because there's a harsher penalty or there's a penalty. The other side of that also is, policy, I think, can also help people understand. Conversation, engagement, help people understand. Again, I said I've had even reps that are white, have those conversations recently where they've just really learning about what someone that's not white things you have to deal with, or we've had to deal with as someone that's not white. So I think policy can shine a light on those things and help people understand maybe some things they didn't get, because it brings attention to things that, again, as we talked about earlier, where they live, they maybe never have any diversity or never have to deal with or interact with people. I shouldn't say deal with, but interact with people. I think it also, when you look at policy and some of the things we've talked about, there's a lot of stuff when you talk about that's come up about police reform and do we change things or what we change. Part of what we've also talked about is policies that help minorities in the areas of economics and health. I mean, COVID, if one thing COVID has done is shine a light on the issues with minorities and healthcare or lack of good healthcare. So also those type of things we can do with policy to make sure that it's a more even playing ground, to give, minorities opportunity to get in the game and benefit financially, educationally, economically. When you look at, I'll take marijuana as an example. That's, it's not legal here in Indiana, it's in other states. When you look at most of the people in jail for marijuana, they're Black and brown people. And now we have this thing that people were being put in jail for selling, that people are now making millions and billions of dollars off selling legally. So, there's talk of what is that policy of it being illegal meant to Black and brown people versus what it's now meaning for mostly white people that are making the money in it. And we have all these Blacks and browns that are in jail and locked up for it. So when you look at policy and, as states are kind of working on making it legal, there's a lot of talk of, do you let people out as long as there was nonviolence, if it was someone just caught selling, but it wasn't violent, do we let people out when it becomes legal in that state? And then also making sure that Black and brown people get some financial benefit from something that historically Black and brown people have gone to jail over. So, you have to look at policy in that sense. Again, you can't necessarily change a person's heart with policy, but you can change how they act, and then also hopefully change how they think and help them learn something based on policy changes.
That's really helpful, I think, because what some people will say is that policy is not going to really change anything because somebody at the end of the day is going to do what they want to do, regardless of what the law is. But I feel like policy has the opportunity to open somebody's eyes to what's going on, and then hopefully they can make a different type of decision, or it gives them the opportunity to see something in a different light.
Yeah, I mean, and even if it's not changing their heart, but people take a second thought about thinking about doing something, like the hate crime. If you are going to do something against someone that's a different ethnicity or, gender or sexual preference or whatever, and you understand if/when I get caught, I'm going to pay a harsher penalty because it was a hate crime thing, maybe it doesn't change you from being against whatever reason is you're against that person, but it might stop you from doing something thinking, this is an automatic this much time in jail.
So policy is one way to attack racism. What would you say are other ways?
I think one of the things that I have been encouraged about in seeing a lot of these, videos that we see going on is it's not just Black and brown people. It's also white people. I mean, the reality is if we're going to make improvements and do what we can to eliminate racism, it's not just Black and brown people that have to be involved. White people, which they have, so I have to give credit, have been involved in that. Whether it's being at rallies, whether it's, we all see now that everyone walks around with, you have a camera, recording things that people do and posting it. It's not just Black and brown people posting that. It's also white people that are not only posting those, but going at people and pointing out what they're doing is wrong. So, the religious community, there's actually, as we're recording this, Thursday, there's a rally, or this coming Thursday, I'm sorry, in a few days, there's a rally at the State House that is initiated by the Baptist Ministerial Alliance up here in Northwest Indiana to do a rally at the State House. They had one at the Gary City Hall, but what they've been doing is we've had a couple of meetings with them as legislators meeting with them. They're reaching out to religious communities all over the state, and not just other Baptist ones or not just predominantly Black ones, but all, no matter what. So, you know, I think the religious community can play a big part of this. Obviously, education. I mean, it really is, you know, racism is taught. You're not born hating or disliking someone because they have a different skin color. So, you know, getting, you know, what happens at school is part of that. We had actually a Zoom meeting last week where it was members of the Black Caucus, and we were with, I don't know if all of them were college age, but I think everyone was a college age group of people that are involved, Black people that were involved and engaged. And one of the things that we said to them is, you know, when you are talking with and having these conversations with your white college friends, there's an influence when they go home and talk to their parents, their family. So, you know, yes, we have our role as policymakers, but I think anyone and everyone can get involved in this. It's just a matter of how you want to get involved, where you are in life. I mean, obviously college students are going to be different than the ministers. So, you know, whatever role you can play, I think people can play that. And again, I've been very happy to see the diversity of people that have been involved in this process, because it's going to take more than just Black and brown people to improve it. It's going to take white people to step up. And at times, as we've seen, point out people that they see are doing things that they should not be doing.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up, but thanks so much for joining me today, Earl.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.